a divisive national moment where America needs a new way forward, Michigan can lead. Because at our best, we are strong and kind. And kindness is strength.
Gretchen Whitmer striking a bipartisan tone in her 7th State of the State address. Part of her message was keep on fixing the roads. But can the aforementioned bipartisanship procure the money to do it? We're diving deeper into the possible ways you and I may have to pay for the roads on the eve of 2 massive projects set to begin in the metro. It's Sunday, March 2nd, 2025, and this is Flashpoint.
Happy Sunday, everybody. Great to have you with us. I'm Jason Colthorpe. Have you hit a pothole lately? Yeah, it is that time of year where the condition of our roads is top of mind. The governor asked for a long-term fix in her State of the State address on Wednesday. Apparently what we saw in 2020 was just a Band-Aid. We're going to talk about possible road funding fixes and what it would mean for Michigan if lawmakers can't come to a deal with a member of the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association. That's a little later. What else stood out in the governor's speech to you? She talked about the need for transparency, but only for earmarks. What about when it comes to accessing information by the public or the media? Michigan also has an education problem right now. The governor talked about the need for limiting cell phones in schools. She also praised Republicans and Democrats for passing the minimum wage and sick time law legislation. Why don't we talk about all of that with 2 of the gentlemen that helped get it done right now on Flashpoint. And here they are. Republican Representative Mike Harris, who represents the 52nd District, which is the Waterford area, and Democratic State Rep Jasper Martis from the 69th District, which is Northwest Genesee County. Guys, great to have you here. Let me start off. I'll ask both of you, did you have any biggest surprises or takeaways from the governor's speech Wednesday?
No, I mean, to be honest, it was a little vanilla. Mm-hmm. I think she was trying to make sure that both sides were happy with the outcome of her State of the State speech, but I don't think there was any surprises there. I think there's some things we'd like to see more of, probably both sides.
Mm-hmm. Did it feel surprising to you that this felt a little more like a handout for bipartisanship?
Not really. Firstly, thank you for having me, and great to see you, Mike. I think Mike's assessment is accurate. I think Governor Whitmer and myself are both political realists, so she understands that the final years of her term, anything that's going to be done has to be bipartisan. So I think there were folks on both sides who were looking for a little bit more fire, a little bit more fight, but she's a political realist. She understands anything we're going to get done needs to be bipartisan, and that was the message she brought. There
were a couple things that stood out. I thought, okay, you're going to easily get everybody to go along with that. Is it fair to say you think trying to limit cell phones in schools is something everybody's going to be on board with?
Yeah, so it actually reminds me, I'm a big presidential historian, right? And so towards the end of President Clinton's term, he really started to realize that, okay, I have a Republican Congress. I'm not going to be able to pass these big transformative pieces of legislation. I want to take a look at the things that they may not be sexy, they may not be the things that fit on a bumper sticker, but they can have an impact on people's lives. And so I think that's, in her own way, what Governor Whitmer's doing. That may not be the thing that gets people really excited, that people are tweeting about. It's not an issue that I really have spent a lot of time thinking about, but those are the sorts of common sense causes that we're going to be talking about for the next 22 months.
Because quietly, education is still a problem and has been for several years. And if you look at the test scores kind of graph, it mirrors the rise of cell phones in schools.
Sure. And, as a father of 6 and a former school resource officer, I mean, the distraction of cell phones is a real problem. It is. It's, I think, as we progress on this policy side, we need to really be conscious and cautious with overstepping our bounds on the local side. I mean, we have local officials we elect to school boards, and so it's a fine line. Does the state get involved? Do we make sure that the locals are stepping up to do what they need to address the issue? So I just want to be careful that we are thoughtful in that process.
Do you think raising per pupil funding, by the way, is enough to turn the tide here? Because we've been raising it for years.
No. And I mean, we're seeing education funded at a level that we've never seen before.
Right.
And I think just throwing money at a problem is not the solution. I mean, money helps, but we need to get back to the core principles and find the ways to actually address the issue.
You agree?
Yeah, I think that we've made significant strides in per pupil funding. I think I'm really proud of the investments that we're doing, not just in higher ed, but also workforce development, opening up more opportunities for skilled apprenticeships, skilled trades. So we're in the right direction, but if you look at where we're ranking nationally, that's not where we need to be.
Yeah, for sure. We've covered that at length on this program. We've talked a little bit about minimum wage and sick time laws too. You guys were able to come to an agreement on this. And I should point out, one restaurant owner told me before this kind of compromise was there, he feared he was going to lose $250,000 a year. And now that it's been raised, or it's been met, he feels like it's going to be closer to 50, but he stressed, he goes, I'm able to hide that within my menu because I do enough volume. A lot of people aren't going to. So did this go far enough?
In my opinion, I think this definitely was a compromise, right? I don't think either side truly got what they wanted out of this deal. But I think we need to put our views aside and look at the business owners and the tipped employees. And I think we helped save a train that was running down the tracks, getting ready to run these folks over.
Because the one wage folks would say, hey, you're ignoring the will of the people here by making this compromise.
So ultimately, the voters should have been able to vote on this in 2018, and that was a previous legislature that Mike and I did not have any part in. The voters should have been able to vote on that in 2018. Yes, I would have been old enough to vote yes or no in 2018. But ultimately, I think it was a strong compromise. I ultimately voted no. I did feel like it was hard for me to vote on the compromise. However, I think that really in both the Democratic caucus and the Republican caucus, there were folks of good faith on both sides of this argument. So could it have gone further in some ways? Absolutely, no question about it. But I think this was really a moment where folks on both sides were operating in good faith.
Yeah, we'll see. Time will tell on this one. You brought up a previous legislature. Let me just ask. We got that ruling this week, Judge saying the previous bills should go to the governor, but not saying you have to send them. Do you foresee Matt Hall sending these on to the governor now that the judge has weighed in on this?
Yeah, I think you're still going to see us go back to continuing our legal review and make sure that we are acting within the Constitution in what's in the law. I think there were some mistakes in some of the bills that are being reviewed, and our legal team's looking at that, and we'll proceed, as we need to legally.
You disagree with the judge saying that, hey, the Constitution is clear. If it passed, it's got to go to the governor.
I think the big issue is, and I think both sides probably agree on this, is why wasn't this done in the last legislature? Who dropped the ball on this? And this should have been done before the 103rd actually came into existence.
Let's hit transparency real quick. She talked about earmarks.
Yep.
Earmarks should be open for everyone to see what every lawmaker wants on the budget.
Yep.
Agree?
Yeah, so I'm on the Appropriations Committee. Our office does not foresee this being a huge change. We think that this is a step in the right direction. I think ultimately there's a lot of things that we need to fix in Lansing. I'm sure we're going to talk about FOIA. We're going to talk about some of the ethics reforms that we've done. But ultimately, we can talk about earmarks, we can talk about FOIA, we can talk about transparency, but the root cause of a lot of these issues in Michigan today is the corrosive nature of money in politics. You're seeing right now, as we speak, Lee Chatfield, former Republican Speaker of the House, on trial for his misuse of dark money in politics. Now, talking about this issue of dark money in politics, quite frankly, can lead to almost a dead horse head ending up in your bed the next day, right? So we can talk about adding this transparency in the budget. I support it. I think it's long overdue. But if you want to get to the root cause of why people don't trust us as politicians, if you want to get to the root causes of the #1 problem in Lansing, that's money in politics.
She shook hands with Matt Hall on the earmarks part of it.
Yeah.
Why can't we get and he mentioned the FOIA laws, those have stalled, and on both sides. Both parties have kind of stalled this over the years. Do you see that making any advancements? And we're talking about, for the people to understand, Freedom of Information Act requests from the public and the media.
Yeah, and I think I've been vocal that I'm a supporter of FOIA. It was very odd coming from local government side to state government and seeing that we don't have FOIA. It was very odd to me.
Or they put up a fight.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think the speaker has a plan laid out on where his priorities are on handling transparency in a certain order, and I think the biggest elephant in the room, even though, of course, that's our mascot, the biggest elephant in the room is this out-of-control state budget. And here we are spending billions of dollars on things that are not, in my opinion, legitimate spending for government. And we need to get back to the root.
Speaking of, is roads a legitimate expenditure? How do you expect us to get there? It seems like a grand idea from the governor. It was tough for her to get the funding for the last time around. What do you foresee happening now?
Sure. House Republicans have laid out a plan on how we can expand this by $3.1 billion without raising taxes or fees. And I think there's a difference of opinion across the aisle with some people on exactly how we do this. I think we all agree that road funding is a major, major point of the budget. But I would like to do that. I'd like to see it without us raising taxes.
I believe the governor did get some applause from her side of the aisle when she said cuts will also have to be made.
So ultimately, Michigan's tax system is broken, right? There's aspects of it that put us in a little bit more of a restrictive budgetary process. There's other areas where I think that we can improve. I do think that Speaker Hall has been operating in good faith with this, as has Governor Whitmer. So we saw a little bit of conversations towards lame duck before it became the lamest lame duck in a very long time on roads. I think we're starting fresh, but ultimately, you know, our tax system, you know, I'm happy that we have a balanced budget amendment. At all my coffee hours, I say, don't worry, we're never going to pass a budget that isn't balanced. And I get applause, and I say, that's because we constitutionally have to do that. So there's a lot of restrictions in Michigan's tax system that make it difficult for us to have these hard conversations on roads, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
How, if it was your choice, what would be the number one way to fund this, to get at least a lot of the money she says we need to make a true fix?
So the number one thing that I would do to change Michigan's tax system would be passing a constitutional amendment to have a progressive income tax. I think we could structure it in such a way that cuts taxes for 90 to 95% of Michiganders while making sure that the wealthy pay their fair share. That's a longer term issue. I think short term, right, we are having those conversations about moving dollars around. I think that there are areas where we can cut some of the pork projects, cut some of the enhancement grants, but ultimately to get to the $3.1 billion that we need to make, I think that's going to require structural changes.
I got 30 seconds. I'll give you the last word. Do you agree?
Yeah, semi.
Yeah, I figured semi, yeah.
Again, I think the funding needs to be there, but if we roll back this corporate welfare, if we roll back the pork project spending, we're there, right? Yeah. And we can do that without increasing taxes on our gas tax, without raising registration fees on all vehicles across the state of Michigan, without adding toll roads.
Yeah. Well, Representative Harris, Representative Martis, thanks so much. Appreciate your thoughts. Absolutely.
Jason, thank you.
My pleasure. We're going to talk more roads right after this on more Flashpoint. Yeah, let's keep the roads discussion going this morning. To talk more about it with us this morning is Lance Benonimi with the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association. Lance, good morning. Appreciate your time. First of all, break down the way we go about funding roads here in Michigan. A lot of us know about the gas tax and how that plays a role, but we're now learning about the usage rate.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having me on. Traditional ways of funding infrastructure throughout the entire country are through gas taxes, registration fees, and toll roads, which are considered user fees. A lot of people have thought that for decades that the more you use the road, the more you should pay. And so as we move our fleets to electrified, and we have more electric vehicles in the market, you lose that gas tax. And so many states are exploring how to track user fees through the miles that they use rather than the gas that they actually consume.
Do you know how they're going to be able to track that?
Yeah, there are very different ways, and I have to say that this really isn't a proposal or anything that's being talked about right now in terms of the funding discussion. This is a long-term issue that we need to solve. But states are doing it in a variety of ways. There are some that collect the information at the pump. There are some that have requirements for emission testing, and they can collect it at the oil change place that they go to. Some collect it at the DMV, and some just send a picture of their odometer right in to pay their bill for the many miles that they used.
Oh, interesting. Now, the governor in her State of the State address talked about raising revenues, cutting spending to get there. But historically, we know a lot of this is tough to agree upon in Michigan.
Yeah, we seem to have a good consensus within the legislature that something needs to be done. We hit a significant financial crisis, funding crisis in road funding after 2026. So they are trying to come up with any types of ways they can raise additional revenues to avoid that cliff.
When you talk about the funding crises, too, it feels like everybody knows, hey, my road where I live needs work. This road needs, I drive one, we need to fix this. But then all of a sudden, I remember Rick Snyder threw out a huge number and everybody was, well, maybe my road's not that bad. Same with Governor Whitmer when she took office. It took her about 4 years to get all of that done. Does that worry you that here we are in 2024 and you say that funding cliff's only 2 years away?
Yeah, we are very hopeful that the legislature can come to a compromise and find common ground with the governor and their counterparts within the legislature. It's an urgent matter. We're talking about potential job loss within the industry into the thousands. And these jobs are highly skilled, highly paid jobs that provide benefits and retirement for those employees. And they will take those jobs to other states where they are properly investing in their infrastructure. They won't stay in Michigan and find a different job in a different industry. Those families will leave, and further exacerbating our population growth problem that we have in Michigan.
And it's a good point you make, too. And I feel like we have two huge projects starting right now. We're looking at 696 in Metro Detroit. That's going to be a 2-year project. I should say M14 out by 275. And we've already seen like the I-75 project is a 10-year project. Is that enough of investment where, like you say, families see this, workers see this, and they're like, I know the commitment's there, even if we struggle to come to an agreement?
Yeah, well, again, we did a very good job in Michigan and with the help of the federal government investing billions of dollars into our roads over the past 5 years. And unfortunately, those investments run out at 2026. As the governor mentioned in her State of the State address, there was a short-term solution that she provided in 2020. And we need to find a long-term sustainable solution so we don't have to worry about the uncertainty of having a job over the years.
Yeah. Is there obviously funding's one thing, but what's the biggest hurdle to getting this money to eventually fixing the roads and getting that final product going?
Yeah, again, we have a pretty good consensus from the legislature on something needs to be done. We've run into it for decades. How we get that done or where that revenue comes from is always the debate. And so we're in the middle of that right now. We have two competing proposals out there, and we're very hopeful that they can come to the middle before we hit our crisis.
Do you feel like this is because it's a cycle? Going back to John Engler days, I remember things were really bad, and it took almost. I remember hearing a lawmaker say, "Well, the roads were so bad then they demanded, it didn't matter what it costs, we've got to fix the roads." And since then, it's a cycle here in Michigan. Maybe it's the weather, but do you ever see us kind of figuring out something that is an automatic long-term fix?
We're certainly hopeful. We haven't found that yet, but it's out there and it's available. We've got all of the information we need. We know how much it costs to maintain and repair our system. And for decades, we've underinvested in that. And, the lawmakers that sit in Lansing now have inherited this problem. I do think that this pothole season will be one of the worst that we've seen. As we've mentioned, most of the investments we've made is on the highway system. So while we're being diverted and detoured off of the construction areas, our local roads are getting beat up without any additional investments. And so both plans have additional money for local roads, and I think that's essential.
Is there anything that, I guess, in the technology of how we build the roads, or even in the way we're making automobiles now, that you feel could help with the problem that's going to come down the road in 26, probably 30 and beyond?
Yeah, certainly. We definitely have made improvements on how we build roads. We're following all of the federal standards that exist out there. And the Michigan contracting community is one of the best. And that's shown by the number of members that I have that operate in other states and do very well and are very successful in those states as well. So we are innovating as a state in our road building industry every single day. and it's a key component to what we do and how we work with the Department of Transportation.
I have 30 seconds. I'll just ask this. I'm not sure if it's applicable, but given all the firings and layoffs at the federal level we're seeing in departments across the board, is there a chance that affects how we get our funding for these projects?
We're certainly paying very close attention to that. It has not impacted things yet. There are a few grant projects that are at risk, and so we certainly will be advocating with our Michigan delegation to make sure that those go through and we don't lose out on some of the projects that we've already gained.
For sure. All right. Lance Benonimi with MITA. We certainly appreciate your expertise and your thoughts this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're right back on Flashpoint after this. It's Oscar night, and this week we lost one of the greatest actors of the last couple generations, Gene Hackman. One of those guys who, when he was in the movie, you knew it was going to be worth watching. He elevated so many that may have been forgotten in the annals of Hollywood, like No Way Out, Enemy of the State, or Quick and the Dead. And he helped make great movies, classics, Bonnie and Clyde, The French Connection, Unforgiven. And those last two netted him his only 2 Academy Awards. So this morning, the 4 Gene Hackman characters I found the most entertaining. And number 4, well, this easily could have been Senator Keeley in The Birdcage or Royal Tenenbaum, but I'm going with Harry Zim from Get Shorty. Something about Gene Hackman in a neck brace that's just too funny. Number 3, Reverend Scott in The Poseidon Adventure. Hackman with hair in this 70s disaster flick is just too good to turn off whenever it's on, even though the special effects are not so special. Number 2, the great Lex Luthor. I grew up on the Superman movies, and as much as you want to hate Lex Luthor, Hackman makes it hard with his little laugh, the gravitas he brings to the character. But his best on screen, in my opinion, folks, has to be Coach Norman Dale in Hoosiers. His performance is the reason this is always in the conversation of the greatest sports movie of all time, and probably because of the speeches. I don't know about you, but when I was coaching my daughter's soccer team, I may have slipped into the pregame speech that ended with, if you go out there and you play to your potential to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says. At the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners. And they went out there, played like champs. I'm sure you disagree with some or all of that, so tell me all about it. Flashpoint at clickondetroit.com is the email address. Meet the Press is coming up next. Have a great Sunday, everybody. We'll see you later.